Good afternoon. I'm Jade Gingrich. I'm Director of Employment Policy for the Maryland Department of Disabilities. I also am a Project Director for the Maryland Promise Grant, and some of my team are presenting next door at the same time. But today, I'm here to talk with you about some significant changes that are happening at the federal level that are going to impact, that the state has to put together some plan and activities around, and that are going to impact individuals, the services, the day, and employment services that individuals in the DDA waiver receive.
What's DDA waiver?
Okay, it's the Developmental Disabilities Administration, and as individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities exit school, there's an eligibility criteria, and if they meet that at 21, there are transitioning youth funds that allow them to go into the waiver that provide funding for long-term support, such as job coaching, day rehabilitation, and so forth.
So the word waiver means
So-
support.
Well, so a waiver, just to get a little technical. No, that's okay. No. It's a very good question because we tossed around a lot. So when CMS first created services, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. Thank you. Yes. That's good. Yeah. The Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, which is a federal entity, provides matching funds to states. And initially, it was focused on healthcare and provision of services and institutions. And in order to move forward the progress, when we discovered that individuals could and should be living in their communities, CMS said, okay, what we're going to do is say, if you can demonstrate that it's cost neutral, we will waive some of our existing requirements around these funds, and we'll call it a waiver. So there are a number of waivers that have been created, and they're called home and community-based services, and the bulk of the adult services available to individuals with developmental disabilities in the state of Maryland are provided through that waiver. And then there's an autism waiver, there's older adults waiver, there's a living at home waiver, but today we're going to be talking about the DDA waiver, which is the Developmental Disabilities Administration waiver, that again was created as a home and community-based waiver as an alternative to institutionalization. Okay, so when the home and community-based waivers were created, the intention was to help people to move out of institutions and into their communities. And in Maryland, we've done a very good job on the residential side of closing down institutions. And so a lot of our individuals with developmental disabilities, and developmental means it starts before the age of 21. And in Maryland, we are a combined, what we call a combined state, so it means that you also have to have an intellectual disability as well, which in terms of defining intellectual disability, it used to be called mental retardation. That's not a term that's very supported right now, but that at least gives you an idea of the framework of the population that we're talking about. So CMS has said, you know what, we created these waivers for people to live in the community. And some of you states did a really good job. And some things have cropped up under the existing waivers that were not really what we had in mind when we started down this road. So they're saying to the states that you all have to create a 5-year plan, and we're going to have to send it to CMS for approval, to bring all of them into alignment with new regulations that they issued. And so they came out with these new regulations and said, you know what, this is what we mean when we say home and community-based, not some of the things that have come up and are being funded under this. So, and again, these changes only apply to DDA waiver funded youth. So, stakeholder input is important, and the emphasis is on the settings and ensuring that individuals are receiving all of their services in the most integrated setting possible.
What is a setting?
A setting is like, are you in a facility or like a residential setting, day program, sheltered workshop. So when they define setting, they're thinking about where are you receiving. We also call them facility-based settings, In other words, are you spending your day in a building only interacting with other people with disabilities, or are you out integrated, working alongside people without disabilities? So when we talk about settings, they're saying, you know what, we've had settings that have sort of propped up that still segregate people, that still keep people with disabilities separate from people without disabilities. So again, the deinstitutionalization of the residential settings focused on moving people out of these huge homes and into smaller based, more community-based settings. So you have 2 or 3 people in an apartment or in a house, not hundreds of people. And they also, under the residential, are looking at, do you get to pick when and what you eat? To what degree do you have choice and control and independence in what your day looks like, in the services that you receive, who you live with? So it's really about sort of being able to make the same choices that the rest of us make on a day-to-day basis, rather than having people or a system make choices for the individuals. So it's taking this deinstitutionalization movement beyond where individuals live to where they work, play, and spend their days. So in early January this year, they released regulations in part to ensure that these regulations are in line with Olmstead. Now, Olmstead is a very famous lawsuit that started down in Georgia, where there were a couple of women who were receiving services that were paid for by the state and by CMS, who said, we don't want to receive these services in this segregated setting. We want the option to be able to receive these same services in the community. And it's a very famous lawsuit because they won. And the Department of Justice has gone on to say, yes, if there's no cost differential, then people should have the right to receive these services in their community, as opposed to saying you have to come to this building over here and only be served alongside people with other disabilities. So this Olmstead decision is really critical because what's happened is that they've discovered that a lot of the waivers and the activities that they were doing really don't meet the legal definition of what Olmstead said. We're really not giving people with disabilities meaningful choices to be in the community alongside their peers. And so this is forcing states to come up with plans and to say how we're going to do that differently and better. Okay. So again, it's full access to the benefits of community living and the opportunity to receive the services in the most integrated setting appropriate. So, a home and community-based setting is integrated and supports access to the greater community. It provides opportunities to seek employment and work in competitive, integrated settings, engage in community life, and control personal resources, and ensures that the individuals receive services in the community to the same degree of access as individuals not receiving Medicaid home and community-based services. So in other words, if you're a person who's not funded by the waiver, are we ensuring that the people who are being funded by the waiver have the same opportunities? Can they go where they want, do what they want? Can they pursue their personal interests? Do they have the opportunity to be employed in an integrated setting, to get fair wages, to not get paid, 10 cents for piecework or something like that? So again, this talks about the Olmstead decision, and that's what's driving a lot of this. And there are a number of states that have faced additional lawsuits specific to Olmstead. So we go to the next one. Okay. So, and the Supreme Court, this has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. The Olmstead decision was a decision that was made by the Supreme Court. And here are some of the key points that they made when they made this very landmark decision. Institutional placement of persons who can handle and benefit from community settings perpetuate unwarranted assumptions that persons so isolated are incapable of or unworthy of participating in community life. So it's really saying what all of us know and believe, just in really big words. So confinement in an institution severely diminishes the everyday life activities of individuals, including family relations, social contacts, work options, economic independence, educational advancement, and cultural enrichment. And we see this quite frequently. Individuals coming out of schools, because the schools, you may, for those of you who have youth who are in school right now, are being integrated and educated alongside your peers, and they come out to an adult service world, and suddenly their classmates that they walked alongside with at graduation are going off to college, and they're going off to settings that are actually not encouraging them to grow and to stimulate and to learn new things. And while people with developmental disabilities may not learn and grow at the same rate as the general population, there's data out there that suggests that the brain never, ever, like they have not found an endpoint of when the brain stops learning. So therefore, we need to create situations after school that continue to encourage that growth and development and engagement into the community so that they can continue to grow and to develop. I've had parents say to me, I never thought my son would be able to use a cell phone. And at the age of 28, suddenly here he is using a cell phone. So we see on a regular basis that when folks are put into the settings where they're challenged to be more independent and to grow and to develop with the right supports, they grow beyond anyone's expectation. And so the goal is to really create a system that allows our family members, our friends, our students to really have that opportunity to grow and develop, not someplace over here set apart from the rest of us, but engaging in the same activities, doing the same things that we would choose to do in our community. Okay, so individuals with disabilities are beginning to challenge some of these settings. And Olmsted is the thing that's driving it. Now, initially, Olmsted applied to residential settings, and I always felt that it applied to where people spend their days as well, their employment settings and so forth. And that's what the courts are beginning to find, which is why there is this big emphasis on day habilitation and employment. So, Department of Justice, Oregon, has a lawsuit. And it was saying that the state was unnecessarily segregating individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in shelter workshops when they could be served in integrated employment settings. And some of us in the room were on a panel on Thursday with a representative from the Department of Justice, and she cited some specific examples of individuals, particularly in Rhode Island, where an individual, before the lawsuit was settled, was making, what did she say, 52 cents an hour? The individual is now working at above minimum wage and pursuing their driver's license. So I think that really highlights the fact that we're not giving these individuals the opportunity to live up to their potential, and it's forcing us to really look at how are we providing our supports and services to really give those opportunities. And what was interesting with Rhode Island was that it said that the school systems were also part of the problem because they were tracking people into sheltered workshops and segregated settings. So it went beyond just saying, oh, it's the state DD agency that's responsible. Mm-hmm.
How are you, if you are, working with the school system on this point? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. So we are working very, very closely with the school systems. There are a number of things that we have underway. And in fact, our Maryland schools have really started to transform what they're doing and how they're doing it. And we actually have a Promise Grant that's recruiting 2,000 youth who are on SSI between the ages of 14 and 16 as some research, half of which will get enhanced interventions.
On SSI?
On SSI.
Isn't SSI income-based at that age?
It is income and disability-based. It has to be both.
I'm sorry, did you defend
No. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so SSI is income and disability based. In order to qualify for SSI at that age, you have to have a disability and have an income. But it's to provide services and employment experiences, because again, there's research out there that says that the more exposure that youth with disabilities have to employment and a paid work experience while they are still in school greatly increases the likelihood that they're going to be employed post-school. So it's looking at how we can expand and make that available. We're working with our transition teachers and our transition specialists. We've gotten a Mystic grant that worked with some of our local schools systems to really think about how they were doing and what they were doing and to look at doing it differently. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, Virginia is another state that had a huge Department of Justice settlement. And one of the things that they're saying is that no student who exits school should exit school into a segregated setting. And only after you've, I think, gone up to the age of 25 with these individuals are you able to then move them into a segregated setting? So it's saying the emphasis has to be on employment, community-based integrated employment, and community-based activities first and foremost. So it's really forcing us to think about doing things differently, because what we have had is a system that says, well, we're putting them into a vocational training program, but they never really get trained, they never move up and out, and they sit there for 30 or 40 or 50 years. And I have to say, if I face the prospect of doing the same thing and going to the same place every day for 30 or 40 or 50 years, I would find that challenging, and I would probably develop some behavior problems. And they're also looking at the length of time that people maintain employment, the amount of earnings, and so forth, because they're really focused on, we believe that individuals with disabilities do have skills and can get paid competitive wages, maybe not to the same degree that the rest of us have, maybe not a 40-hour work week, but there are skills and abilities, and they can do so much more than we've been allowing and empowering them to be able to. Okay. So. And to set targets to meaningfully increase. So they're saying we have to start to measure this, and we have not been measuring this. We can't tell you what the outcomes are. We haven't designed a system that says, okay, over the course of your 30 or 40 years, what have you done differently? What have you achieved? Have you moved into employment? How long have you stayed in employment? What wages have you got? So it's really starting to look at what are the outcomes for these individuals, and how can we ensure that we're providing the supports and services for them to achieve the outcomes, and to achieve the outcomes that they want for their lives, to really develop a meaningful plan that sets goals and supports them in meeting those goals. So New York is another one. New York's was a little bit different because that was an agreement with the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. And again, it's saying to the state, you have to start to measure this, and when you have your baseline, you have to start to increase and come out with different outcomes. Okay? Yeah. So what does it mean for youth who are funded by these DV waivers? There are going to be more choices and opportunities for them to be part of their communities. They're going to be given the chance to express what they like to do, want to do, are good at, and to offer input into what they want their lives to look like. My hope is that it allows for flexibility in the system and allows for a mix of services, and maybe allows for people to try new things and discover that they're good at things that they never tried before. So, also, the ability to play a role and provide input and feedback as to what they want or need to be able to live, work, and play in their community. And again, the whole concept of these waiver services are to provide supports. The question is, well, how can we support you to do what you want to do, as opposed to saying, we'll only give you support if you'll do what we offer in our little box of tricks. And the opportunity to explore diverse work experiences and development of new interests, friendships, and skills where they live. Actually, a theater company for people with and without disabilities for a while. Because one of the things that I thought about professionally was, if I spend my days advocating these things, why don't I have friends with disabilities? And I realized that most of my friends I had acquired through doing theater, and I had never had the opportunity to interact with people with disabilities in a theater setting. And so I created a theater company, and I have a lot of friends now. I don't maintain the theater company because work and parenting sort of overtook it. But I now have friends who are friends not because they have disabilities, but because we have shared interests. And I think that this is a real opportunity for us to look at developing new interests and developing new networks of individuals based on shared interests, not just be my friend because you have a disability, but because we both like the Ravens or we both like theater. And that opportunity to really engage in community activities and build relationships based on shared interests. Okay, so what does all this mean for families? So we need for families to understand the value of employment and the importance of these community-based programs. And on our website at the Maryland Department of Disabilities, we've developed a series of videos that talk to parents who had the same fears that some of you are probably out there thinking to yourself, that I'm not certain that my child really can work. What about the safety issues? What about benefits? And we looked at a couple of examples of individuals who had been successful, and we heard from the individuals, from their employers, and their parents to talk about how they made that art, because we recognize that it is scary, and you have a lot of questions and concerns, and we wanted for parents who have already done that journey to be able to share that so that you as a parent could see and know that there are folks who have already made that journey. One of the individuals that we featured is a young woman who is blind. She has an intellectual disability, and she also has seizures. So we would consider that somebody with some pretty significant disabilities. She is working in a glass factory. And it takes you through the work that she does, the value that she offers to the employer, and so forth, because it highlights that when we use some of the best practices like customized employment and really focus on what the employer needs and what the strengths are, we can really come up with some significant jobs for individuals that are meaningful, that are in the community, regardless of their disability. Okay. So, schools need to ensure that the 18 to 21-year-old population in particular are gaining community-based employment skills and experience. So if you're sitting down and working on transition plans for your son or daughter, I would like you to say, where's the employment piece of this? What are we doing to develop their employment skills? And make certain that that gets included in there. And schools need to convey to families and youth that they need to plan and prepare for post-school employment, post-secondary education, and community-based programs. The service options that are available now are likely to look very, very different. And so we need to be prepared to be ready for those changes. And we need to ensure that all of the school programs are as integrated as possible.
What do you mean the service options are likely to be very different? What does that mean?
So right now, a lot of the options that we have are day habilitation, which means that somebody comes and picks your son or daughter up, takes them to a setting, they spend their entire day there, they get picked up, get driven back home. CMS is saying that we have to provide opportunities for the individuals to be in the community, we have to provide opportunities for them to pursue integrated employment. So it's likely going to be a mix of options. That's not to say that there aren't going to be any options. It just means that they're not going to be sort of that static, going to the same place day in and day out, doing the same thing. It may be a mix of activities in the community based on interest. And we have some providers who are already doing this. So let me just make this clear that we know that it can work because we have providers. I went to visit a provider that again worked with individuals with significant autism as well as other disabilities. And they showed me a book this big that listed all the different sort of community-based activities. And every day and every week, the people that participated in that program were given the opportunity to choose and select from that. There was music therapy, there was gardening, there were opportunities to go to the gym. So there are a lot. Now, we also recognize that depending on where you live in the state, there are very different choices. As I like to say, in Montgomery County, there's absolutely no reason why anybody should have to spend more than an hour in any sort of segregated setting. Because there are all sorts of community-based activities throughout the entire, I regretted having to work because I was missing out on all these great activities. Now, if you live in more rural parts of the states, there are not as many opportunities. And so how do we ensure that there are meaningful opportunities for engagement? How do we look at maybe bringing the community in? What are the opportunities in that community and how can we get those individuals connected? And how can the supports that our individuals need follow them into those settings? So as opposed to you having to come over here because we have a staff person over here, how can the staff person take you and your friends out into the community to engage and to look and to learn and to do things? If there's public transportation, how do we ensure that folks are learning how to use that? We created a post-secondary program for students with intellectual disabilities at UMBC. And every parent said, I had no idea that my son or daughter was capable of this. They were taking public transportation, navigating the campus independently, and they acquired those skills much more quickly than we might have anticipated. So, for the service providers, we have to be prepared to address individual and parent concerns because we shouldn't negate that. And it's really important to hear those concerns and to say, but could you try it just for an hour, just for a day? Okay, what did you like about it? What didn't you like? It's going to be an evolving process. It's not going to be an all or nothing, or we tried it once, that didn't work, we're never going to try it again. We need to understand what's happening and ensure that our programs are in compliance, because we as a state really don't want to face another Olmstead lawsuit. And I'd rather design a plan and have it be our plan as opposed to having the feds come in and impose a plan on us. So we need to think about how can we be creative, what can we do differently. We need to minimize and or eliminate facility-based and or segregated programs and focus on community-based activities, including individualized integrated employment. I don't think that they're gonna go away, but I think the size and the scope of them need to shrink. And they need to be places that you pass through on your way to something as opposed to a destination where you spend 30 or 40 years of your life. And we need to develop staff skills and competencies in job development, customized employment, employer expectations, safety and community, and other areas. Okay.
Hello, my name is Danielle Lyons, and I'm the statewide coordinator for transition and supported employment for DDA. And I'm going to focus on the updates to DDA services. So DDA offers 4 employment services: supported employment, community learning services, day habilitation, and employment discovery and customization. So supported employment is services that's integrated in the community with other individuals without disabilities. I just want to include that this does include job coaching services. This no longer includes volunteer services. At one point in time, volunteer was under supported employment, and that is no longer a service under supported employment.
Volunteers by the disabled people or of other people for the disabled people?
Volunteering services, so if someone wanted to volunteer at the Humane Society or at a nursing home, the individual that's receiving the services can volunteer there.
Meaning the disabled?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know.
They can still do it, it's not under supported
Right.
employment, and that was a federal requirement that we changed that.
So I just want to give an example because supported employment is considered at least 4 hours a day. We all know that individuals with disabilities may or may not or are able to work 4 hours a day. So an individual can work 1 hour a day and receive other employment services for the other 3 hours to make up for the 4 hours that they are required to receive supported employment services. Day habilitation services is those services that are in your traditional day facility, and that's intended to increase the skills to be independent, as well as develop and maintain motor skills, communication, and personal hygiene. Even though we're still offering day habilitation services, DDA is trying to move away from those type of services to have more integrated community services. This is one of our newer services, community learning services. It's services provided in the community with other non-disabled peers. This is provided in groups of 4 or less individuals. Some of the services that we offer under community learning services is employment, preparing for employment, self-determination. A person can take classes and workshops. Also, if someone is older and retired, they work and they're now retired, they can participate in community learning services. It's just a way to get individuals that are now working or interested in working, but they're still integrated in the community. Employment discovery and customization is another newer employment service that DDA offers. It's time limited, 6 months, and the goal is to assist individuals with preparing for employment. So an individual might receive benefits counseling if they're unsure, they're ready to work because they receive Social Security. They can receive this benefits counseling to let them know how they can possibly work and still maintain their benefits, or just to show them that they can work. An individual may participate in travel training so they can learn how to navigate throughout the community or to work. Job development and customization, these are all the type of services that someone can receive under employment discovery and customization. So now I'm going to give a brief update on resource coordination. I know a lot of you all were in the earlier session with resource coordination, but now resource coordination is now targeted case management. So there is based on unit hours of service. They provide the same scope of services and rate structure is used for the non-Medicaid eligible. The biggest role for resource coordinators is to provide assessment, planning, obtaining and retaining of services, assist with gaining access to needed support, and this is regardless of how the services are financed. Also, the biggest role of resource coordinators is to help the families and individuals with receiving resources in the community. This may include housing assistance, food stamps, public transportation, and social activities. So the DDA funds 3 types of ongoing resource coordination services. the development and periodic revision of the individual plan. So they're making sure that the individual plan that is done is being monitored, and referral and related activities. Resource coordinated primary work focuses on coordinating with other service delivery systems and ensuring that DDA funded services are meeting the person's needs. So they're really making sure that if the person is with a provider, that provider is making sure that everything that the individual wants is being taken care of. Okay. As of March 2014, DDA now have 3 new resource coordination agencies: MARS, Optimal Healthcare, and Total Healthcare, Total Care Centers for Supportive Services. And the reason that DDA decided to add 3 other choices is to give the families and individuals choice. Traditionally, before the individuals were receiving service through their local health department, or service coordination for the central region area, or resource connections for Prince George's County. So this is giving families a choice. So if a family is unhappy with their services from that one provider, they can choose to receive services from another provider. I'll go back. So for Central Region, these are the providers in Central. So the 2 again is MARS and Total Care Centers, and they're both here today. And these are the providers for our Southern Region. Again, the only new one here is MARS and Total Care Centers. Same thing for the Eastern Shore. They have MARS is the only added selection. And for the Western Region, they have MARS, Optimal Healthcare, and then they still also have service coordination. So the waiver update. So prior to March of 2014 was when our waiver was approved, and it was with the start date of July 2013. As you all know, we had 2 different waiver services. We had the community pathways and we had new directions. Those 2 waivers now merged to be one waiver, which is now community pathways. The reason for this merge was to give individuals more choice to self-direct their services. So an individual can, if they decide to self-direct, and self-direction pretty much means they're able to self-direct their services. They don't have to necessarily go to a traditional community provider to receive their services. They're able to streamline access to services, update and standardize service descriptions, and enhance the quality and oversight of the activities. As far as our waiver, these are all the services that an individual can receive under the waiver, which is that long-term funding that Jay was talking about. Some of the changes were assistive technology and adaptive that was added. That's a service that can still be accessed through DOORS, Division of Rehab Services. The community learning services were added. Employment discovery and customization was added. You all know community supported living arrangement, CSLA, that is now called personal supports. Resource coordination is now under the state Medicaid plan. It's no longer a waiver service. Here's our contact information as far as DDA. If you have any transition youth or employment questions, you can contact me. Linnell Sanderson is the contact for resource coordination questions. And Will Pack, if you have any questions about the waiver, he's a contact. I would like to say that we're currently reviewing our waiver in the transition plan. So it may be some changes to our waiver services after March of 2015.
I have a question. My son is 16, which is found eligible for DDA. Is the waiver an automatic thing of DDA or is something separate?
Okay, so anyone can apply for DDA services. So your son was determined eligible for DDA. Around February to March of the year he's going to transition to DDA services.
Would you be at 21?
At 21. He then has to apply for the waiver, and that's to allow for that's to be eligible for the long-term funding. So he can be DDA eligible, but he he has to still have to apply for the waiver. And some of the things that might not make someone eligible for the waiver is financial eligibility. So if he does not receive medical assistance, things like that, that's the biggest holdup of why someone might not be determined eligible for the waiver or approved for waiver.
So should we not pursue SSI support?
No, please apply for SSI because you need to have medical assistance to be waiver eligible.
If you get SSI, you get Medicaid.
Yes.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kathy Lyas. I'm staff at the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. That is different from the Developmental Disabilities Administration. The administration is a state agency that funds services. The DD Council, which I'll refer to as Council or DD Council, is a federally funded program to advocate for the full inclusion of people with disabilities in the community. Now, before I go on, I just want to follow up on some of the things that Jade was mentioning with a new CMS home and community-based ruling about residential and day settings. The state of Maryland has to come up with a plan, and right now that's just called the transition plan. There have been some opportunities already for providers, one session, families in another, people with disabilities in another, to put for input into that transition plan. There are still opportunities. If you still want to write, you could write to Bernie Simons, who's a Deputy Secretary of DHMH now, or William Pack, that was one of the references that Danielle said, had as well. They're going to develop this transition plan, which is due in March of 2015. Before it's submitted for approval to CMS, there will still be another opportunity for public input. So you may see another opportunity, or, I just want to put this up there so you know if it says, do you want to have input into? And I'm sure DEA will have on their website what their plan will entail. But it is to comply, to be into compliance with what CMS is requiring. So if you want to see what DEA's plan is, that would be a good opportunity. So I digressed a moment. Sorry, Daniel's and my slides weren't printed, but you'll be able to see those on Monday at the, I'm sorry, no, 30 minutes, okay. I will take about 10 minutes, and then we'll have another about 20 minutes for questions. So I wanted to talk about employment first, and a little bit more about community inclusion. You may have heard of a concept called employment first. It's not just relevant to Maryland, but throughout the United States. And that's a belief that employment should be the first option offered to people receiving the waiver services. I equate it to when your son or daughter is at school and you're looking at what kind of setting. The first setting should be the most integrated and then progress. And if they can't be in the most integrated, then there should be steps, activities to see if they could be part of the most integrated activity. So as Jade said, we find that most people are very happy when they're employed. They're in the community. They can meet people without disabilities. They can learn things. People are satisfied. And for the most part, families are satisfied. So nationwide, 46 states have taken some action on employment first, and 32 states have a formal policy. And what is a formal policy? It could be a directive from the governor, could be a directive from an agency head, executive order, that comes from the governor, legislation, or any combination of the above. In Maryland, we have a directive, and it's actually issued in 2008. That DEA believes that the first option offered to people should be employment. And if it's not, then there should be action steps to help that person either be more involved in the community, perhaps it's not a job, but ways to work there, like volunteer positions, or just more exposure to the community. So Maryland directive says employment will be the first option considered for all people working age who receive DDA funded services. And there was a group that consisted of parents, people with disabilities, providers, numerous people, advocates, who said these are our values, that we believe in work, that people can realize economic self-sufficiency. They actively explore and develop their own unique career path, engage in negotiation in terms of their employment. What does that mean? Well, when there's a service provider and they have staff who help what we call customized employment. So if there is a, employer says, we have this job, why don't you come in and see this job? So, and part of this job is you have to input data in the computer, and this is sensitive information, so afterwards it has to be recycled and it has to go through the recycling machine. And the job developer said, well, we don't have anybody to do the computer part. But could that person job share and do the recycling? So it's customized to what the person is interested in doing. Let's say like office work, they want to be in a white collar occupation. It's customizing the job. So when they engage in negotiating terms of their employment, engage in all aspects of their work environment, be in the same lunchroom with everybody else, go to the same parties. So we're not talking a group of people going to a company and working in a separate room, or they have a special lunch time. Be truly included in their communities. That through Employment First, you can build and maintain connections and relationships throughout their career path, and they have access to information, resources, and quality services to support their careers. So what does it mean for a person receiving DDA-funded service? When the individual service plan, sometimes called an IP, individual plans developed, employment should be the first option considered. I know that's not happening now. I'm not going to ask people to raise their hand. That's not happening now, but it will be. And then, if that person can't be employed, there should be a plan to remove the barriers to employment. So what are those, barriers? 20 years of training in a workshop, taking letters out of an envelope and restuffing them is not training. So a realistic plan for a person to get a job in the community. And that's why summer jobs are so important for students who are still in school, as well as any volunteer positions they can hold as they graduate. I'm going to switch gears again. Daniel had mentioned community learning services. So what happens for a person who may only want to work a few days a week, or is unable to work or sustain that work, a full 40-hour work week? What happens then? We have this option under Medicaid waiver. It's called Community Learning Services. And I just want you to be aware that this is something you, your son or daughter, can request when they receive DDA waiver services. They're not facility-based, so they're not segregated settings. They assist people in developing skills, social supports necessary to gain employment, which could include volunteerism again, but it could be a job club, a group that's working on the resumes. That these activities promote positive growth, provide activities, special assistance, support, and education. The difference between can all happen if somebody is funded under day facilitation. The big difference is community learning services are in groups of no more than 4 people. So we're not talking about you take the bus out to mow and hope people get an idea of what jobs there are. So no more than four. I just lost my thought about that.
Small
The
teams.
exception to this rule, which is allowed under community learning service, is self-advocacy activities. So if there is a self-advocacy group that is meeting someplace, that can be included if for more people. So I'm not going to go over this too much because Danielle covered it. The community learning services can lead to employment, self-improvement, like continuing ed classes at local craft stores, joining a local civic organization. Well-being could be exercise classes, healthy cooking classes, weight control program. And CLS is a good model for people who are retired that no longer want to go to sheltered for day program. They're working less than 4 hours in a day as a supplemental service. The transition youth, they aren't sure about their future, what they want to do, or they're currently receiving day services in a day segregated setting and are interested in receiving services in the community. Thank you. So now, we'll entertain questions.
Somebody mentioned waivers. Is there a list of waivers? You said medical waivers and autism waivers. What other kind of waivers are there? Work something
There's a
waivers?
living at home, the older adults waiver,
Autism.
autism waiver. If you go to the CMS website, you can, and search on Maryland, you can find a list of all of the Maryland approved waivers. Yeah.
Okay, my big question was, this all sounds like wonderful. So does, integration in the school systems, that all sounds wonderful. But as we have all found out, anybody that's been through the school systems, there's unintended consequences when you try to do this big inclusion model, is that there is no funding for the supports. So as I'm looking at this, and you're showing that, for the community-based learning, it's like no more than 4 to 1. And in your typical agencies right now, most of them will not, they will tell you that they can't afford to do that. So, and I'm just looking at an unintended consequence of this because there's only so much money, and that money might go down. Or, we don't know. So, my big worry is that the unintended consequence of this, even though I think this is a great thing, is that we might be giving better services but a lot less of them. So my adult child might end up sitting at home with nothing because it's going to be much more expensive to deliver these services. And that's just the reality of it.
Well, it is reality, and I won't go too much into the history of this. But community learning services and employment discovery and customization were actually included in the waiver 3 or 4 years ago. And as it was developed, DDA envisioned that those separate services would get paid more than day rehabilitation. That was our vision. That hasn't happened because resources are very, very scarce. And get together with any provider, they say that they don't have enough money. I know the DDA is engaging in a contract to look at the rates that providers are paid. And it's sort of at this moment out of anybody's hands to advocate. They're going to wait for the study to see what the study proposes. I can tell you for employment, the service, for day and employment services, which are paid on the same level. It's not fair, but it is. Just goes my thought.
We pay more than many other states.
Yes, that's right.
So,
I've heard that. I family live in other
Yeah.
states and they don't come here as worse.
Yeah, that's.
and we have some providers who are doing it with
I
the
know.
existing funding, so I think it's also important to point out that some providers have
Right.
figured out a way to do it.
Right, and I think my daughter's gonna be with one of those.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, but they won't transport.
The,
Nobody transports.
The DD Council funded several organizations for what we call the organizational change project. Because we realized that service providers could not continue to do the same services as now and do community learning services, supported employment, that there needed to be an organizational change and commitment. And some of those organizations really have taken that on and done a really good job. And I had lunch with one of those executive directors on Wednesday, and he said, Maryland would be surprised. If you go to Pennsylvania, they only pay for job coaching. That's it. Day programs and job coaching, so nothing for job development, although the state of Washington is held up as doing really well in supported employment, they only fund people in supported employment. Those people who are not, maybe still need to build those skills, they're sitting at home. So you really have to look at the data very closely as to, what happens. So,
Well, just
yeah,
because it's terrible elsewhere doesn't mean it's good here.
yeah, right.
Well, I guess that's just my worry, because I saw the whole inclusion thing in the schools. That's where you want your child, that's what you want for your child, but when they take away the supports that can make that happen because of school budgeting, it totally falls apart. And you're not getting, so what I'm picturing is, that's an entitlement. Right. So you're going from an entitlement model to this is a non-entitlement, you get what you can get, and you're gonna say that, so CMS is saying you have to follow these rules now, and there's not funding for it.
And these
There's no
children-
way to, so I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm just.
Yeah.
These children are
You know what,
citizens.
there's another hand up here, we're gonna.
Oh, just, I guess it's sort of along kind of her lines, but what I see is that the individuals are young adults with severe behavior problems, biting, headbanging, all those kinds of things, is the supports, so they can't access these because the agencies that are being funded to provide those services don't want those individuals, so then by default, they have to get the home-based services. And, which right away now you're talking less inclusion, less integration. But also, what they would really need of the intensity level to deal with those behaviors, the money's not there at all. So, not to mention a parent that's got a 40-year-old that's headbanging and biting, how their limitations are to take care of that, which I would think would be, and of course everybody's competing for the money, so that's understandable. But I find that those really, and I'm a private provider, I find that the most severe that should, I hate to use this word, be able to get those resources.
Yeah, and that's a
are
problem
actually-
now, even before.
are actually the
Yeah.
most excluded from them, because which is just really tragic, I mean, for families. And I know everybody, that doesn't mean everybody kind of doesn't, what do you call it, but I work as like behavior stuff, and to be paid $40 an hour for me that has a kid that's biting, young adult, everybody in their homes, they can't access anything, there's no law that says that, you said entitlement, exactly right, there's no law that says any of those people have to
And
provide.
that is, all of the states are struggling
Yeah.
with this.
I just
And
wanted
that's
as a
why we're,
statement.
and CMS is sort of setting lofty expectations that go, as I like to say, Rhode Island got 10 years to comply with Olmstead. They're giving all the states 5 years. So, but that is why it's important to have that input and to think about what are the choices that we have now. And I hear from parents all the time that they're not happy with the choices that we have now. How can we transform that and move from the choices that we don't like and the money that we're spending on the things because better than nothing. How can we move that over to create these choices? And you're right, one of the things that CMS is staying silent on is there are groups that I would automatically say should be, looked at in a very different lens. For example, the forensically involved. I mean, there are limitations, and for those of you who don't know what it means to be forensically involved, they have a criminal record or whatever. So they're not individuals that you can just sort of say, here you go out into the community, and there should be different parameters, and CMS, we're still awaiting some guidance around that. So I want to make.
For self-abusers, I mean,
Correct.
there's nothing, I mean.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
I also wanted to make a point, I'll get on my soapbox, just a moment. I mentioned this in the other session. Transitioning youth funds to serve your son or daughters is approved on a yearly basis by the Maryland legislature. It is important for you to be out there asking that be placed in the governor's budget. And that is certainly scary. I mean, I'll get up higher on my soapbox with the governor that's coming in and said he's going to cut more than $1 billion from the budget. So that is very scary. I know they wanted the legislature wanted to tinker with the budget last year for transition youth. Fortunately, I think everybody was funded. But if that money's not there, then people go on the waiting list. I'll sit down.
No, thank you.
Yeah, that's really important.
Community pathways, is that I know you have this 2-day training that happened in November and is happening in December. Is that what that is? I'm a little confused on community pathways and that training that's there where you do more individualized programming.
Self-directed, you mean?
Yeah, the self-directed where you're kind of building the program. It's sort of like running your own program for adults. What is that and where is the training?
On the website, they have the different trainings for individuals that want to learn how to be support brokers or self-direct services. But basically what self-directed services is, the individual or the family can control the service. So again, instead of going to your typical community provider, they have the option to provide their own services. So they will hire a support broker, and they get the funding from DDA to hire their own staff and do their own services instead of going to a community provider.
That's called self-directed services?
Yes.
For some reason I thought it was called community.
Well, it was New Directions.
It was New Directions, yes.
New Directions.
Yes.
And they combined them.
Yes.
So
Okay.
if you use the term self-directed services.
Okay, it's just the names.
But as far as like receiving support broker training, they do have updates on our website under the training section of our website as far as any new support broker trainings for self-directed services or what was new directed services.
We have about 8 more minutes.
Just the person that asked that question, if you can find Mary Scott somewhere, her daughter is.
I was behind you.
She did they used to call New Directions, now it's self-directed. I would say she would be a good resource.
Thank you for that advertisement. I'll give you your check later.
I'm sure she wants more people calling her, but she's a good, I'd be a good person to ask.
Okay, so Mary Scott has a question, one that I don't have to answer. I had a mother call me the other day whose child is already receiving a program, a day program from a provider agency. In addition to that, for years she's been getting in-home supports from another provider agency. She wanted to know if she could continue with the day program and self-direct her in-home supports.
There are certain services that someone can receive 10 self-directed services and receive services from their community provider. I would say the best person to talk to about that would be, her name is Nancy Hatch. And I can give you our main number. You can contact Nancy Hatch.
Thank you.
Another good resource to talk to is Shared Support.
Shared Support is a provider in Maryland, but very, very progressive, really believes in inclusion, supporting people in a person-centered planning process. So they've been doing some recent workshops on person-centered planning and how to self-direct.
Did you find that on the website or about shared support?
If you just,
Google show
Yeah.
support, it'll come up.
Okay.
Okay, we have a question over here.
What happens if you make your 4 choices and none of the choices that you pick
Except
to
you.
take your son on?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
What if you make your 4 choices and none of the providers that you picked are willing to take your son
That's the case I was talking about, and that is a problem.
That's happening more and more.
Yes.
Especially with any
Particularly if they
child that
require
needs a
one-on-one.
one-on-one, they won't take them.
Behavior, yeah.
I definitely would suggest working with your resource or service coordinator to help you to find another provider to be able to assist you with finding services for your child. That's really their role to assist with that.
But I mean, if it's a child who doesn't learn one-on-one and has a lot of issues, you're limited anyway in your choices, so I would think the 4 choices you made are probably your best hopes, so what are your options?
Direct self-directed.
That's what a lot of families are going to. If they can't find a provider to work with them, they're starting to choose self-directed services.
And is there a timeline for if you can't get a provider for your child? Is there a timeline then to get into self-directed services?
That all starts at the same time as the traditional.
well, that's an interesting question because you have like a year, maybe even less than the that.
In the transition years.
Yeah.
Do they let you know in a timely manner?
Pardon?
Do they give you a timely manner, like if they turn you down that 4, that you can always switch to self-direct, so you don't lose that use?
I don't know, that's a question for DDA and,
And it may vary from region to region.
Yeah. All of our regions, vary as far as timelines and things like that, so. But I definitely would say, first, work with your resource coordinator. If they can assist you, contact your local regional office.